Hello, everyone, and welcome to one of my very first episodes, really, because this is my first time with a guest. We're going to be discussing social media usage, not just because of what you do. I can tell you're just extremely insightful.
Thank you.
He's a life coach, and I know him because he has worked with certain family members of mine and done wonders in my family, to the point where I reached out to him not so long ago and asked him to help me. And I think the reason I've chosen this topic in particular is just because it's a baseline for where I want to go with this podcast in terms of understanding how, as mothers, we navigate life with things that are just way out of our depths because they're just so new, aren't they? Yeah. And I imagine, given the amount of experience you have, which is how long?
20 years.
20 years. I didn't even know life coaching was a thing 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's always been a thing. Not so much popular in this country, but in places like America, it's been big for.
Yeah, have you worked in America?
I have clients who are in America. So it was a thing that only celebrities had for many, many years.
Yeah.
But then it cottoned on because people recognised that people didn't really want counselling, they didn't want therapy, they didn't want a psychologist, they wanted someone who covered all areas and wasn't bound to any kind of
rules.
Yeah,
I like that.
So it's almost like having a professional friend with knowledge and experience of a wide range of things. You can get different types of life coaches, and you can get directional and suggestive. So directional will tell you what to do, and suggestive will just hints. It depends what the occasion requires and what kind of questions you ask. Sometimes you need to give a direct answer, and sometimes you need to be suggestive. But again, it's all down to the client. You don't tell people what to do. They have to come to their own decision, really.
Yeah. I am interested in what you've got to say in regards to your views on social media, because for me, I would say that I have quite a positive experience of social media.
Okay. But what do you mean by positive experience?
Just that it's helped me in my journey in terms of recovering from COVID, heartbreak, helping me find myself, having something that holds me accountable for investing in myself.
Okay.
And also not feeling as alone, which is obviously, as mothers, single mothers, something that is huge. So definitely helped me, but I can also see the negatives.
Okay, but if I said social media in general, would you think good or bad?
I think it's a double-edged sword.
Okay.
I don't think there's good and there's equal amounts to be. I don't think the scales are tipped enough from what we know about it, because we, like you said, we don't know that much.
Yeah. But then that's from your experience.
Yeah.
But you have a purpose on social media.
Yeah.
It's your job, and it's where you communicate. So because you have a purpose, for you it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So imagine if you didn't have a purpose on social media.
Yeah, it's addictive.
So imagine having £1 billion and going shopping for things that you didn't need. It would be more detrimental than it is helpful. And that's like social media. So imagine being on there for hours and hours a day with no real purpose on there. You're just going to stumble in things like insecurities, comparing yourself, getting involved in conversations that you shouldn't, and just having arguments just because you can. And so there's no...
Having arguments just because you can.
Yeah.
Is that something you recognise and see regularly? Like people just getting a bit...
It happens all the time. I have friends and clients who say to me, they're going to get off TikTok. I'm like, why? Oh, because it's toxic. But then I'm like, it's the way you're using it.
Yeah.
And then that becomes the problem. So you can misuse anything. So a lot of people don't know this, and it sounds really weird, but do you know that they used to once put real actual cocaine in Coca-Cola?
Yeah, I know.
Right.
I've heard of that.
But then people don't believe it. It's only over time we've become responsible for it. So cocaine is a drug that you can use for the benefit of people, because it's been misused over time. It now seems like a really bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think social media is exactly the same way. I think it's a great tool, but because we misuse it And it's a really bad thing. People have committed suicide because of it. There's mass bullying because of it.
Yeah.
And then you have the keyboard warriors that get together and then harass people, or they close businesses down, or they get people cancelled. And that's a real terrible thing because it's not governed. But you can't really govern social media, can you, because of free speech? Surely, at a point, does it not come back to the parent parenting the child?
I think as someone that's probably got a lot different style of discipline as yourself, because male and female, I don't know, but with my kids, I'll tell you how I've stood with social media, and there's a massive difference between my older daughter and my younger daughter. Kyla was all for social media. I allowed social media in terms of what was around at that time. There was no swiping, there was no scrolling. It was, you wanted to find something and she used it to her advantage, and it's part of the reason why she does so well. She was making them loom band outfits, she could make shoes, she could make a jacket out of loom bands, she could do the Rubik's Cube in literally 30 seconds because she learned so much. She was a sponge and she was absorbing so much. And then and I was judged because that was brilliant for me, because I was a single mom, I had a million things to do, and she was so fully entertained. And there was a lot of mums, because we were part of a church, who were doing craft activities with their children one on a regular, with their husbands out there providing for them. So I often felt like quite judged for that child having an iPad. And then lockdown happened and we were all told to homeschool our kids, and they had to navigate their whole curriculum on an iPad, and all these mums going, oh, I don't know how to do this. And my kids were fine. So I feel like I'm not saying that we shouldn't have levels and discipline and stuff. I'm just saying the world is what it is. So we have to roll with it and understand it the best we can, rather than just implement all this discipline.
If my son has his phone, for me personally, I feel that with all the parenting he's had from me and his mom, that he would know and understand to not visit certain websites or go on social media. So he's 11 years old and he doesn't have social media himself because I think he's too young to have it at the moment. Because I think there's too much exposure. And the moment he goes on there, he's exposed to a world that we now cannot take back from him. So I want to almost preserve his innocence for as long as possible. And also, the more responsible he gets and more he learns, is hopefully the more he'll know what to do and what not to do on those sites. But I do think that whoever a child lives with has a certain responsibility to make sure that their child doesn't go on certain sites.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and I do have regret allowing Ava to go on to especially TikTok. Not so much Snapchat, because that's been a chatty way that she interacts with friends. But definitely with TikTok, with the swiping. The swiping is a big thing, I think. Psychologically, they've done, I don't know, they've talked about how when we swipe for Tinder and things like that, it's linked to the gambling as well, how we swipe with gambling. There's all kind of addictive.
But to be really kind and simple about why swiping and these apps are addictive is because as soon as you get bored, you then swipe to entertainment. So what actually happens is you are cognitively training your brain to only receive excitement all the time. So the why that affects you in real life is because when you get bored in real life, you can't swipe. You have to sit through the boring parts. And then because your brain cannot take those boring parts, we start to act up and become mischievous. And then it all goes back to social media. And this is why I don't think it's a great tool to give children. And I think as adults, we have to learn to really monitor ourselves. Because when we were younger and we went to the toilet, throw number 2, it'd be a book, a magazine, or you sit with your own thoughts. Whereas now, not just kids, but everyone brings their phone with them. So then your mind has no downtime at all.
I know, it is a problem. It is a problem. And I'd be wrong to say it wasn't. And watching my kids massively, I'm trying to teach them that, because my way of dealing with things has always been welcome them to expose ourselves to what we want to control. in a sense.
Yeah.
So rather than me go, okay, we're just not going to look at this for a bit.
Yeah.
I'm not going to have this for a bit. And then when you're older, I explain it. That's never worked with my kids. They've been very intellectual from day one, and I've had to, that's the type of communication we've had. And it's not worked out great, but I hope I've managed to wake them up. And I think this is why I want to do social media content myself, is because if my kids are in it, if my kids are paying attention to that, I want to be what I want them to look at, if you get what I mean. So they say I'm cringy and they don't look at my content, but at some point I'm sure they will look at my content and what I've got to say.
Okay, but the difference for you is on social media, you have a purpose.
Yeah, no, I'm saying like my purpose is to talk to my kids. A lot of what I say is for the purpose of my kids.
Why?
Because that's where their eyes are at. I lost my kids to Uncle Alexa and freaking Auntie Google a long time ago. They were sponges. They wanted information. They were never the kids that will just play with dolls or whatever.
So then do you just accept that loss?
I manage that loss.
Okay. How do you manage that loss?
I manage that loss by putting down, making a digital footprint that I want them to follow in terms of my mum's gone. So I want to, I haven't even got a video of my mum. If I was to go tomorrow, I want them to have my thoughts. I want them to have my ideas. I want them to have my guidance. I want them to have all that in a phone.
Are you saying, correct me if I'm wrong here, are you saying that the way to deal with social media is to give them more?
No.
Okay.
Of course I'm not.
Okay.
I'm giving you my personal story and I am not average, and I'm not trying to tell anyone to be like how I am. We have got to control it, and I am pulling Ava back, and I'm trying to manage the kids, and I'm constantly talking to them, and I feel like I have their ears more because I do social media.
But how are you trying to control it?
I just take her phone off her now. She doesn't have a phone, and she's a different person.
And then how does she cope not having a phone?
She's getting better, and she's brilliant. She's like a different person, and she's becoming aware of the difference in herself. And again, that is something that I want them to learn.
Okay, I have a question for you, as always. What is life about?
I don't know that answer to that question, Leon.
Okay. But this is something that we all really need to think about. Because life has become about entertainment. And that's what we do. We just entertain ourselves. And we entertain ourselves until we get bored of the entertainment, and then we have to seek more entertainment. So when I done high risk mediation in the city, in the UK, it was about trying to stop offenders from committing crime. After years of doing so, I had a meeting with whoever, and I said, you can't take something from someone and not replace it with something else. Exactly the same way as social media. You can't just take social media, we can't take social media away from children unless we replace it with something else. So what else are we going to replace social media with?
So I have started a Netflix series with Ava, and it's just been brilliant because I really see the difference in attention span with kids now because of, I mean, everyone and anyone is saying that they've got ADHD, but they're not talking about how they are swiping and needing all that. And it's it's obvious it's affected our attention span.
Of course, yeah.
When we were young, we sat all in the room, we all watched one programme together collectively, and we all paid attention to that programme for an hour, and that doesn't happen now. Me and Ava have started watching a Netflix series, found a really good one, and it's been an absolute godsend because it's our thing and we were excited to do it, and she doesn't ask for a phone, and she's had her phone taken off her for a week, and we're like, should we watch an episode of Manifest? And then also doing stuff whereby I say you can go on your phone, but what are you going to do? Are you going to create or are you going to scroll? There's a difference.
Okay.
So I want them to learn that. I want them to be creative because I've seen the benefits to how social media has elevated their creativity and their confidence and their presence and their personality and their charisma. And I don't want to squash that. I just want to monitor it. I do question them. I'm like, what are you doing on there? Because if you're doom scrolling, let's talk about it. And I feel like they listen because they know that have got this purpose on social media and I know what I'm talking about.
So what is social media?
It's a space, a psychological machine that's governing us in such a way that it's going to be the new frigging... It's governing us more than the government is governing us.
Okay.
Religion used to do it before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Kings, queens, they used to control our collective consensus of what we assign value to. Government then did it and said, now you've got to work for us. Your value is in your labour. And now we're anti-government. Now what's controlling our thoughts and our collective values is social media.
Is social media controlled by someone?
AI?
Okay. And who controls AI?
No, I would say social media is controlled by loads of psychologists that designed it.
Okay.
Is that more?
So then,
right?
we're just having a conversation, you know. So then, is there, in your opinion, having a conversation,
Yeah.
is there an agenda behind social media?
Of course, yeah.
And what do you think the agenda is?
Super control.
Okay.
So would you say the government's controlling social media?
I don't know who's controlling social media. I'm just asking the question. Is it fair to say then, as soon as we log onto our social media, we are looking at an agenda straight away?
I don't know, because I do see a varied amount of social media, whereas I am going to look at Russell Brand and his awakening chat, and I'm going to look at other stuff that is massively controlling, especially through COVID. Oh my God, that was just mental.
How come? Question.
Yeah, go on.
How come everyone seems to know the latest dances?
TikTok.
And on social media?
I don't know, have you seen me dance?
I have, yeah. And there was,
I did not look good.
you know, it was.
I have got so much rhythm that just doesn't seem to come out
It
on
was.
TikTok.
It was so funny. There was one video you done in the car, and it looked like you had rigor mortis. And Google it. But I was laughing my head off. But it was funny. But so you're very free on social media, aren't you?
Only because I've rid that journey,
Okay.
which is what I'm trying to say in terms of progression.
But you are one of the few.
Because I'm the few that stuck it out.
Okay. Have you had any bad experiences on
I've
social media?
heard loads.
Like what?
Give you one example, horrendous.
Okay.
Christmas Day, I did a little vlog in the morning. I was there, first time I'd ever woken up with a partner since the kids' dad moved out.
Okay.
And we always have Bucks Fizz, we always have orange juice and champagne. And I was doing a presents and I sweet the bottle of champagne. Anyway, someone messaged me saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. Your mum was an alcoholic and you're there swigging in front of your kids in the morning. You should have your kids taken off you. I'm going to ring social services. This is Christmas morning. I'm reading this shit, bearing in mind Christmas morning is a massive trigger for me. Like, because I just have memories of holding my mum's hair back every Christmas, trying to save the turkey. Christmas is just a messed up time for me. So to have that message just went, and then my immediate thought was, what the flip have I done? Like, what have I allowed to come into our Christmas and affect me so it will ruin our Christmas Day? Then, and this was about 2 years on, I'd been doing it for 2 years, was in the shower, I was crying my eyes out, and I just felt this kind of wash over me where it eased off. The anxiety and the horrible feelings washed off me. And I was like, huh. And I felt this significant difference in terms of how long it took for that to come off me. Whereas if that had been 2 years ago, I'd have been a mess the whole day. Took me until I showered. And then I got up, I got dressed, and I was like, what the flip? I'm like, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm in this arena, because I want to develop the resilience required to be in this space. So I got back on the camera. I got all the validation I needed from people going, don't listen to blah, blah, blah. But ultimately I said, this is why I'm here. This is because I noticed the difference between learning how to be resilient to those comments. But also, Leon, I was able to practice grace and forgiveness and be able to go, okay, on the hindsight, that person might have learning difficulties. That person might have a really shit life and they've just thrown comments Does that person represent a whole world? No. On reflection, that person is one person in the billions. So what we need to be able to adjust in ourselves is this reality that one person's comment doesn't represent a whole people.
But it affected you.
It affected me, but I was able to apply the necessary things for it to not affect me and to learn what it actually meant was that it was just one person making a comment that might have real lack of understanding.
Okay, but what if they didn't? What if they were a banker on 7 figures a year
I don't
and
give a
very
shit.
academic?
What if, shoulda, coulda, woulda, I do not care. I practice those things. I put them things into play.
But didn't you justify it by saying that person might have learning difficulties?
I applied grace.
Okay.
I applied a graceful, forgiving nature, because whether you got diagnosed learning difficulties or you're an arsehole, you're still someone's child and you've still developed them.
Okay. So you had to, okay. Am I wrong here in thinking that you had to justify his behaviour by excusing him to get over it?
Forgive his behaviour.
Okay.
And I think that if you're someone that wants to deliver peace is something that we need to practice and grab every opportunity to practice that. And social media did that for me.
All right. So what if that was happening to you all day, every day?
Oh, I wouldn't pay.
Okay. But then that's the problem.
Yeah.
To some people, it happens all day, every day.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. And I think, yeah, I was talking to a friend who got racial comments, a tweet. I'm always encouraging her to be in social media. And then she told me about some, like, hundreds of racial comments. And I was like, whoa, my experience can't measure up to that kind of shit. And she's like, I have to be okay, every profession.
Okay.
And she tweeted something linked to racism, triggered a load of racists to respond. Yeah.
Of course it will. Yeah. But listen, I couldn't imagine how these celebrities feel. Because they get it all day, every day. And when people are like, oh, I want to be famous, I'm like, you're only seeing what's the so-called good side. Because they'll get it all the time. Not just celebrities, but people who are on their social media, people, personalities or whatever. But why are you on social media?
Me?
Yeah, like,
initially, I would say because I relied on someone, how I used someone's account to help me be accountable for how I took care of myself during a really bad time during lockdown. And this person, she was big on exercise, big on talking, big on this, and I related to her. I loved her vlogs. It gave me something to do in the day and it helped me. And then I wanted to be that for a group of people that didn't have that. So I wanted to try and bring that to the table, but then also allow access for the deaf community. And that's ultimately, yeah, I just wanted to copy her content.
So if you have to sum up your message, I am on social media because, how would that sentence end?
It's different because it's changed, it's evolved. It's not something that, I would say your reasons change on the weekly.
Okay.
They're different.
So do you not have...
I could give you a list.
Do you not have an overall ethos about why Hayley Brain is on social media?
I think my overarching reason will always sum back to that, my mum.
Okay.
Be it that was the most significant experience, watching her break from something that was completely avoidable. And I feel in my heart that had social media been around in the way it is now, she wouldn't have felt as isolated, as ashamed and reluctant to seek help. Because that's just what she was. To the day she died, she had doctors saying you're an alcoholic, and literally she was on her deathbed saying I'm not an alcoholic, because there wasn't a world where people talked about those things. It was a taboo topic. I was literally fighting a battle where taboo topic was killing my mum.
Okay, my question then is, did your mum need better help, advice and guidance, or did she need social media?
She needed taboo topics to not be taboo topics.
Okay, and could that have come through better help, advice and guidance, or did it have to come through social media?
You mean experts, medical professionals, counsellors?
Or friends, or just a group of people?
It needed to come from a society not allowing taboo topics to govern her thinking.
Okay. It's a delicate subject, so but what if then someone, let's say someone, Jane, is an alcoholic, and Jane goes online, but instead of stumbling across a group that was helpful, positive, and encouraging, she stumbled across a group
Yeah.
who were negative, horrible, and who were all the other stuff.
Yeah.
How would that have helped her then?
It wouldn't have. It
Yeah.
would have massively intensified her problems. But I kid you not, Lee, I remember going to Aquarius, which is the group that's associated with the NHS, the counselling
Yeah.
group. And this guy was a counsellor for Aquarius. He turned around to her and said, "Oh, you're looking really well. Have you got a tan? You look really well." She was jaundiced. Her eyeballs were yellow. Her skin was yellow. She was jaundiced from liver failure. And her counsellor was going, "You're looking well. Have you been on holiday? You look like you've got a tan." I really wanted to headbutt that man because she walked out of that meeting going, "Oh, he said I'm looking okay. I'll go down I'll have a nice glass of wine to celebrate."
Yeah.
And this is a medical professional that's supposed to be helping me save my mum. I'm not saying that. Yes, she could have come across one person that was bad, but she'd come across one person in her local NHS that gave her a bad interaction. Then it is a double-edged sword, social media.
It is, and I think
But there is ways to...
I think it's almost like playing Russian roulette, because if social media is great because it allows you to find people and things, but I think it's bad because it also allows people and things to find you. And if the wrong thing finds you at the wrong time of your life, it's not a good combination. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful place, but it's also a lawless place where people are not accountable for their actions. And if you meet that side of social media, it can be the worst thing ever. If you meet the other side and use it responsibly, that's good. And that's why I say it goes back to, how do we use social media responsibly? That includes the pages we visit, the people we allow to visit us on those pages, and also the time we spend on social media. But that's never emphasized. I know Instagram have this thing now where it pop up and say it's late or you've been on it for a long time. But then we have to have the discipline, which we don't as people, to say, I'm going to spend half an hour on this now, or an hour, or 20 minutes, or 30 minutes. But back to my point is, now we live in a world where everything is online. If we're not online and we don't use social media, what else is there to do?
There is lots to do, and I would hate to think that we can forget about them. And this is why, again, another reason I'm on social media, because I feel anyone in above of our generation is highly important, because we have a foot in what was and a foot in what's going to be.
Then what we have to understand is that social media is actually a career choice. It's not just, you can make millions or billions from social media. So it's an option. There's always a chance. It's like playing the lottery. So it's a chance to showcase skills. So you're going to want to be on there, and your friends are on there. It's society, isn't it?
But I'm saying, yeah, so you're going to want to be on there, and how you conduct yourself on there is fastly becoming important. Navigating this is just insane for a parent. When I can imagine this is something that when you're dealing with children, when you're life coaching with families, do you do lots of families?
Yeah.
I imagine social media is just an umbrella area where you have to zone in on for all of them.
Yeah, it's become a way of life, isn't it? You know, the thing with social media,
like, how do you manage it? How do you control it? What's the advice you give to parents?
to family. I don't directly give people advice about social media. I give people advice about loving themselves, being independent, and being free from everything that has to validate them. Self-validation. The problem with social media is that you will always find someone to agree with you, no matter how strange your views are. You'll always find someone, and that's why it's so comforting. And that's why, again, it's so damaging. Yes, it has its great points, like it really does. But social media only really exposes what's already in you anyway. So that's why when it comes to families and individuals, I promote self-love, self-care, self-preservation, and ways to look after your mental health away from society. Because if you do that, almost encourages people to use mental health, to use social media more responsibly. So I don't focus on the problem, I look at the solution.
Yeah. Okay. So when talking to me, which is someone who's used that validation to enhance what I would consider particular gifts I have, what would you say to that? I've used someone basically tapping me on the back and saying, well done, Hayley. Keep going with this, Hayley. I've listened. I've fed off that validation. I've kept going. And now, and I am constantly, not just validation, I'm talking about like messages from people that literally say, you've helped me so much feel better about myself. You've helped me feel less hopeless about life. But messages from people that are saying, and I've done that on the back of having validation and using social media. What would you say to that?
So,
am I in danger? Am I in danger of just being addicted to that validation or that growth?
I think that you already are addicted to that validation and that growth, because you will put a lot of things on social media, things that private conversations, family and children, friends, and I think you're very comfortable with it. So now your children are more comfortable with it. So your children have actually inherited social media now through you. The danger is with everything else is when people start to get obsessed with people, or when things don't go your way, or you might have 2 or 3 comments on a day where you don't feel as great. What I would say is, and I would ask is, how do you manage the days and times that don't go so well for you? And do you have a mechanism? Do you have, I can shut off from this and leave it for a couple of days?
Yeah, I will turn off the app and I will have a social media detox.
Okay.
And I will very much up that game if it does come to a point where I am affected. Being aware of how I'm affected, to me, is just as important as not being affected.
How are you aware if you're affected?
Because I've been in the place where it affects, it's almost like exposure therapy.
Okay.
And that's where I said it's helped me develop a resilience in order for me to grow in a society that is all messed up.
Do you reply to comments?
Yeah, every one of them.
And that in itself becomes a job.
Yeah.
How many hours a day do you spend on social media?
In the lockdown, when I was building it, I would say it was about 3 hours a day. I would say now, replying probably just, 10 minutes every, so 6 times a day.
What about building content, scrolling through?
Building content, I'd probably say about 3 hours a week. No, 2 hours a week, 3 hours maybe. Scrolling, obviously I'm as addicted to it as everyone else, but I'm more conscientious of it because I'm wasting time. For me, I'm like, I've only got a certain amount of time to do this. Do I want to create, or do I want to engage, or do I want to scroll? So I'm so much more aware of how much I'm scrolling and how addictive that is, because it's putting me off the thing that I'm there for. That's even with someone that's got a purpose. So God only knows how someone that hasn't got a purpose manages.
Scrolling changes the way your mind functions.
Yeah.
But no one ever really talks about it. But even if they did talk about it, it still wouldn't change anything. I don't believe it would. Do you remember the time when tobacco companies were forced to put the images of diseased lungs and hearts on the box? I remember they fought against it, almost fought a long time. But then somebody quite cleverly realised it doesn't matter what image we put on there, people will still buy them. And they did. So it doesn't matter the warnings we put out. We say don't text and drive, or don't phone and drive. We say don't drink too much caffeine, don't have too much sugar, don't doom scroll. People don't care, because we don't see because we don't see the immediate consequences to these things. People don't. So if getting hit by a car didn't hurt until 2 years later, and people would be more careless when they cross the road. I know it sounds really stupid.
But learning about ourselves in a way, like if you saw, it always comes back to social media. If you saw someone being hit by a car on social media, you would learn that the lesson that they learned. Don't get hit by a car. But all I'm saying is we learn from each other in a different way now, and we can almost, I call it the big brother change, because that was revolutionary in terms of how we see each other. We no longer saw actors on the screen. We saw people being, in some ways, themselves, and how we absorb information about one another has massively changed. So it changes how we see one another, and I think understanding that on a deeper level is really important. And
but we seen that because we come from the generation where Big Brother didn't exist. But those who are now born in the Big Brother generation, they don't see that.
And that's why it's even more important for us to talk about these types of things, because we were from that generation.
But do
you remember seeing Big Brother for the first time and being like, oh my God, he's not an actor, he's been himself. That's mad.
But that was a novelty to us. But do you remember when, even before our time, where kids would listen to their parents and their grandparents, and it was a generational influence on people? Now you've got parents who are doing the same thing as kids are doing, so no one's listening to anyone else at all. But I think we will understand the consequences later on in life.
But that argument goes off the back of if you've got a good parent and you've got good grandparents. But do you see anyone managing their mental well-being and their health very well lately? There is lots of messed up people out there. So if you have access to someone that isn't so messed up, that's a good thing.
It is.
To see representation of, and that's why I do share so much.
But I don't blame people. As I always say, I don't believe we are good or bad. I believe that we are circumstantial, but we are inherently destructive. Because you could do something on Monday and it's bad, something on Tuesday and it's good. It depends on the circumstance. But if there are no guidelines, then there is no accountability. If there's no accountability, then there's no right or wrong. So anyone can do whatever they want to do. It's when we find out the repercussions, the consequences, that's when we're going to have a problem. We can't sit there all day, scroll and nothing happen to our minds and brains. We cannot do that.
So managing scroll time, because again, we're talking about two different uses of social media: creating, having a purpose, being present, engaging, and scrolling, and not being aware of what's influencing you. So little tips, I think, which are pretty general: setting specific time limits for daily use. That's the consensus between all parents. But I was actually talking to someone about that the other day, where they said, do you have a screen time for your daughter? And I was like, you know what, I don't. And I'll tell you why. And I'd love to hear your view on this. I want to be conscientious of how she feels, how she behaves, how she's being, and I want her to learn that. I don't want her to assign that to a number on a screen saying, oh, you've done 2 hours, so you're not. No, because 1 hour on one day is going to impact you very differently to a different day where 4 hours, you might have done 4 hours. You've got to be connected to yourself and what you need, and that is going to differ. I never forget my mom only going into a counselling for her alcoholism, and then they're asking how many units she drank, and then telling her, oh, you're okay, because on the board, that's what they assigned it to a number. And I don't want us as parents to start assigning so-and-so down the road, she only has 3 hours and my child's had 2. I'm all right and she's okay. No, we need to be conscientious of how our kids are engaging, how their emotional well-being is reacting.
Okay. And I think by looking at the units,
it's a guideline. It's a good guideline.
But I think looking at the units, and I think looking at the social media time, I think we're focusing on the problem. The solution is, what do we do when we're away from the screen? Are we going for walks? Are we drinking okay? Are we eating okay?
Or are we waiting for the next hit?
That's it. You see?
Yeah.
So are we being healthy away from the screen time?
Yeah.
Because if someone just puts down the phone and they're going to wait for another hour,
Yeah.
they just sit at the wall, sit in the corner, stare at the wall. That's not good.
Yeah.
But what are we doing in between times that we're waiting to go back on the phone? That's the important thing.
Okay, so emphasis on what you're doing when you're not
Yeah.
waiting to have your phone back, or when you're taking it off your child.
Yeah, because
But in kind of
because we can't just blame social media,
No.
because social media is actually a way of easy parenting as well. It's easy.
Yeah.
But are we going to the park? Are we going skateboarding? Are we going on our scooters? Are we sitting around the table and talking, having dinner? Those things are more important, I think, than coming off social media. Because if you learn to like something else, it will reduce the time that you're doing something that you shouldn't be doing anyway.
the more we like social media, the less we're going to like taking walks in nature.
Of course, because we're going to get all the endorphins and dopamines from scrolling on the phone.
It's scary. It is scary, and I'm glad we've touched on a lot of these scary points, and I would talk about this all day, every day, but we have got to go. So thank you so much for being with us.
No problem. We'll catch up
Thank
again
you,
soon.
Leon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so here are my takeaways from today's podcast with Leon. The conversation was brilliant, and I want to try at the end of each guest I have on here, put down some takeaways of how I feel about the conversation, just so that we can ensure clarity and accessibility. Here, as the host of The Inadequate Mother, I will try and openly share my struggles and all my failures, and also just highlight where we can learn for future generations of parents. It's really imperative for us as inadequate parents to understand these lessons, to then better equip our children and future generations and how they handle the complexities of social media and the digital life that is changing so rapidly. I really feel that the ultimate thing we need to focus on is the ability of self-reflection and awareness, understanding why you're using social media. Is it for entertainment? Is it for validation? Or is it just for information? Are you recognizing the potential of doom scrolling and how it's impacting your dopamine and how you maintain healthy balances? It's really important to monitor your usage and just to be mindful of how it's affecting your daily life and your well-being. Why are you doing it? What's your reason for being there? You're not just going to be looking at a screen time number to check you've not got screen time. I think it's important to know how you feel and how you're constantly responding to it on a daily basis. Ultimately, every parent's going to have a unique approach to social media. And it's really important that collectively we all recognise and respect these differences on social media. It's really an addictive tool. It's an addictive drug, and understanding your purpose for using that thing or that drug, whether it be entertainment or information, is really crucial. It's about managing the impact it has on your life. And I feel like for me as a mother, from my personal opinion, balancing exposure to social media for children is really essential, and kind of preventing the development of detrimental habits by being able to teach responsible usage in a controlled environment that is home is where I'm going with my take on things. Everyone's grappling with these challenges and its addictive nature, and we all feel completely inequipped. I feel completely removing social media might not be the right solution, and taking a more proactive approach whereby your children can manage their usage of social media while still being under the guidance of parents. Balancing the preservation of their innocence is obviously important, whilst learning about the digital world in an environment that's safe, the sanctity of home. I feel that it requires a proactive approach because it's a lot of work, And it also means constant conversation and self-reflection, which is going to mean your kids are going to go, stop being annoying, I don't want to hear it. And you're going to be that annoying parent. The goal is ultimately to help them navigate this powerful tool. And these conversations, they might not engage with, but they might remember when they're older and when they're venturing out on their own and trying to manage it on their own. Ultimately, social media amplifies existing tendencies. So fostering self-awareness is really critical, and just understanding the mindset you have with social media to have a healthy and reflective attitude. It can really enhance positive traits, but on the flip side, without this self-awareness, social media can exacerbate negative tendencies and create additional challenges. Those are the kind of things that I have taken from the conversation and my reflective kind of insight into social media usage as a parent. It's hard, and I just think it's really important that we understand we're learning on the job because this is so new. And when you learn on the job, you're going to make mistakes. But what's really important is that you hold your hand up and you go, okay, maybe that was wrong. Or, you be honest and you talk them through. So tune in for more of these open, frank conversations, and hopefully we can kind of learn together as inadequate mothers, parents, fathers, whatever you are. Hit subscribe and I will see you for the next episode. I'm flying at this, guys. I'm doing it. What's your Instagram again?
I have no idea what it is.
We're gonna get that going.
Yeah, we'll find it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Subscribe. This is the cringy bit where I can't do it.
Don't worry.